Genesis 37 verse 2 is where we're going to be today. We have been in a Bible series that has spanned about 7 months, and we're going to continue in this same Bible series for about 2 years. It's a walk through the Old Testament, looking for the promises or the promise of God, the promise that was instituted all the way back in Genesis 3 that he would save the world, and that was reiterated in Genesis chapter 12 that he would use men and women like you and me to bless the entirety of the world. And we've been looking at this story of God's promise through the lens of some characters, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And today we move on from Jacob and into Jacob's sons. In fact, we move, as the text will say, into the account of Jacob's family. This is an important pivot point, Genesis chapter 37 verse 2, because we move from just single patriarchs that we are following to now thinking about the family of Jacob. And the family of Jacob will be called Israel. And so from this point forward, our story is focused on not just a single person, but the whole nation of Israel. And we will follow them from this point all the way until the day of Pentecost. We will be thinking about the story of Israel until the day of Pentecost, where God opens the floodgates to allow all people from every tribe to be a part of his community. Now, this is where we're going in the long term about the people of Israel and the nation of Israel, and we'll stop looking at individual characters and start looking at a nation. But today, and for the next couple of weeks, our attention is going to be on a new character named Joseph. Joseph is a transitional character, helping us move from the patriarchs of Genesis into Egyptian captivity. And we're going to follow his story for the next 3 weeks. I love Joseph. He's one of my favorite characters in the Bible. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have kind of a mini series for the next 3 weeks. So this is like the ministry of God's promise, the dreamer. That's what we're going to do. The ministry of God's promise, the dreamer, where we're going to be looking at the story of Joseph for the next 3 weeks. These next 3 sermons are all about dreams and about vision and about doing what God has called us to do and becoming the people God has asked us to be, and about this idea that there are times in our lives where it is so clear to us that God has a bearing or calling, something on our lives, and sometimes it's difficult to fulfill those things because of life circumstances. Sometimes it's difficult to fulfill those things because of who we become and our own shortcomings and failures, and we're gonna see the way that God takes the dreamer and does something amazing with them. So if you've ever been a dreamer, if you've ever had a dream, if you ever had an idea, if you ever thought, God is calling me to do something, these next few weeks I think will be fun for you. We'll do the dreamer, that's today, and then the interpretation of the dream, that'll be next week, and then we'll close it out with the fulfillment of God's dream. And speaking of dreams, I want to introduce a subject that maybe you're familiar with, but have you ever heard this term, kingdom dream? If you've ever been, this is kind of old school with our community, but if you were around our church for any length of time, there is discussions about a kingdom dream. And what it means is when you become a Christian, you start thinking, man, what can I do in my life that God would be happy with? And what can I fulfill? And who can I become? How could I serve? How can I do something in the church? And many times when you're a younger Christian, people ask you, what's your kingdom dream? And you'll say, my kingdom dream is to go to Africa and share the gospel. And people go, that's a great kingdom dream. What's your kingdom dream? My kingdom dream is to serve the poor in Broward County. Oh, that's a great kingdom dream. We used to talk about this a lot. It's a bit out of vogue. But I want us to, if we can, kind of to set our brains and to kind of set context for this time, I want you to think, what is it that you want God to do with your life? More than that, what is it that you think God is asking to be done with your life? And I want you to keep that thought in your mind as we think a little bit about Joseph and talk a little about him, and we journey through his life and we look for the next 3 weeks. Are you ready? You guys are bad. Are you ready? Sweet, here we go. Genesis chapter 37 verse 2. Joseph, a young man of 17, We could pick up the story 17 years after the birth of Joseph. Joseph was born in Genesis chapter 30. He is the son of Israel, and here he is, 17-year-old kid, and here we get him, and the very first sighting we have of him is of a snitch. Are you ready? Joseph was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Jephthah. I don't know how to say these names. His father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Joseph is in the field with his brothers. He's hanging out with them, and he notices something interesting about what they're doing. We don't know what exactly they're doing that is wrong, but he comes with a message about his brothers, and he brings it back to his dad. He says, there's something I have to tell you about your sons. They're taking naps on the job, I don't know. They're eating the sheep. Oh no. We don't know exactly what he says to them, but as he leaves the open country and returns to his father, he has something to say about the sons. Now the father, who is Israel, who is Jacob, he responds in a really interesting way. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. Joseph has a special place in Jacob's heart. In fact, he is his favorite son. There's a man named John Louis who once said publicly, dysfunction is the gift that keeps on giving. And we've seen this idea of favoritism from one generation to the next, have we not? Rebecca had a favorite, Isaac had a favorite, Abraham had a favorite, and so it's not surprising that Jacob, Israel, now has a favorite. And his favorite son is Joseph. Maybe it's because he talks badly about his brothers. Maybe it's because of some other reason, but it says it's because he was born to him in his old age, so he loved him. And he loved him so much that he wanted to make his love for him manifest in a visual way. And it says this, that he made him an ornamental robe. He made an ornamental robe for him. This is the classic Joseph, the coat of many colors. Someone said earlier in today's service, I dressed the part this morning. He said, I want to show you how special you are. And so here is a gift. I want to express my favoritism to you in a visual way so that all of your brothers will see that you are my favorite. Now, I'm not sure if he thought this would be helpful for his relationship with his brothers, but it did not produce, if he thought it was, what he hoped it would. Verse 4, when his brothers saw, because they could see the dress, that their father loved him more than any others, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. The robe, a visual illustration of his father's favoritism, is shown to his brothers, and his brothers cannot even bear him. They can't bear him. And so far in the narrative, everything that Joseph has done and everything that he has received has not served to unite his brothers, but to alienate them from him. So far, he has come, tattletaled on them, and now he is wearing an outfit showing, look, brothers, look what dad made me. Isn't this amazing? And they hate him all the more. But it actually gets worse. That's the setting. Next verse. This is the 17-year-old brother who now goes back to his brother, 17-year-old Joseph, who goes back to his brothers with the clear sign of favoritism being worn. And then it says, Joseph had a dream. Joseph is a dreamer. And we're told that he then tells his brothers. He's not just a dreamer, he's not just the favorite, but he also lacks a bit of self-awareness. So he goes to his brothers and he urges them, hey, I have a dream. Brothers, I had a dream. And it says they hated him all the more. They hated him all the more. Here's this brother. He tells on us, he wears these ornamental robes, and he's also a dreamer, and he wants to tell us his dream. What could this dream be about? Verse 6. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaves rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. He's out in the grain field gathering sheaves, and my group, my set of grain stands tall, and yours bow down to me. This is a picture I found online, sort of the image. This is what they would look like. This is what these little grain sheaves would look like. And he says, mine would stand upright, and yours would lay prostrate before me. They're all gathered around me. That's the dream I had. Joseph makes no attempt to interpret the dream, analyze the dream. He's a narrator, not a commentator. But we understand what this dream is supposed to mean. It's what the brothers thought it was going to mean. Verse 8, his brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and what he had said. They understood the dream as a prophecy that Joseph was saying, you are going to be my subjects and I will be your master. I will be in charge and you will bow down to me. And if they couldn't hate him anymore, the line says they hated him all the more. But it doesn't end there because Jacob continues to dream. Verse 9, then he had another dream. And he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream. And this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father, who was a dreamer before, kept this matter in mind. Sometime later, he tells of another dream. This time it's not just his brothers bowing down, but it's his father and his mother as well. Joseph's mother, Rachel, has been dead since chapter 35, so this is kind of a weird inclusion to this. But that's the dream he has. One day, sometime in the future, all of you will bow down to me. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to be in a position of authority over all of you, and you will come and you will be my subjects. His brothers hate this vision, but his father keeps it in mind. Again, his father having once been a dreamer himself. So quick review. There's no less than like 5 reasons for his brothers to hate him. He has spoken badly of them. He has some obvious favoritism that has been on display with an ornamental outfit. He insists not once but twice that he, in this pompous dream, that he will be the one in charge and that all of them will bow down to him. And each one of these things is just another opportunity for the brothers to hate him more and more and more and more. And then this happens. Now the brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem. This is about 20 miles or so from where their home is. And Israel, that's Jacob, said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. Hey, go to your brothers. I want you to give me a report on how they're all doing. Verse 14, he said to him, go and see if all is well. Because last time, you said they were eating the sheep, or you said they were sleeping, or you said whatever you were saying. So just make sure they're doing okay. Make sure they're all right, and bring back to me a word of how that's all going. So he sent him off to the valley of Hebron. Jacob sends Joseph to inquire about his brothers, and this is no short journey from where he has to go to eventually where they are, Dothan. It's about 50 miles. He journeys, and of course, as he is looking for his brothers, he is wearing the ornamental robe. Of course. Verse 17, so Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They're away from the safety of their home, and they think it's fair game now for their animosity. They're not expecting Joseph to come, but on the horizon, they see him coming because he is wearing the robe, and they conspire to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Here comes that dreamer. Here comes the boy who said that he would be superior to us. here he comes. And remember what he said? Yeah, that we are going to bow down to him, that he's going to be high and that we will be low. That was the dream. It says, come, let us kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dream. A cistern is a pit shaped like a bottle, with a small opening on the top that would be covered by a stone, and they would put water in it. They would plaster the walls and then put water in it as a place to hold water. And what they say is, hey, there's an empty cistern over there. Let's kill him, and then let's throw him into the pit. And then we'll say that a ferocious wolf came or a ferocious animal came and devoured him. And then we'll see that his dream could not come true. Why can his dream not come true? Well, because he's dead. And also because we are above him, looking down at him, because now he's in a pit. They're mad about lots of things with Joseph, but they're mostly mad at his dream. They're mostly frustrated with the prophecy that he was given. Reuben speaks up to try to defend his brother, but he defends him in a really strange way. He says this: when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, so let's not kill him and then throw him into the cistern. Don't shed any blood. Instead, throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness. So let's not kill him. Let's instead torture him by throwing him into a pit. That would be better. But don't lay a hand on him, Reuben said this, to rescue him. So he thought he would come back later and kind of pull him out from the cistern. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Joseph's chances of escaping by himself are minimal, and so they intend to kill him. And here it is. We're actually going to stop the story here, and we'll pick up the rest of it next week. But this is the introduction of a dreamer. If you've ever been a dreamer, you've experienced this. You've experienced the highs of dreams and the lows of disillusionment. The dreamer to pit dweller is what this is, but I want to show you how it all ends so that we can make kind of an important clarification or important point. In Genesis chapter 42, what ends up happening is, and we'll talk about this next week, Joseph actually gets pulled out from the pit and is sold into slavery. He's sold into slavery. He lives as a slave for many years. Eventually, he works his way up because he can interpret dreams. He works his way out of that whole slavery system and becomes the second in command in Egypt. And then it says this is towards the end of Joseph's life. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, that's of Egypt, the person who had sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. The story ends exactly as Joseph said it would. But I want us to notice something about his journey. I want you to notice something about the journey of Joseph, but also about the journey of any dreamer, the journey of anybody who's been called to do something wonderful for God. There's an interesting story about the way that dreams work in the economy of God. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the adage of the story of a hero. You've heard of the old writing adage, the hero's journey. If you've ever written a book or tried to write a book, there's a parabola in the way you're supposed to tell the story of a hero. It goes like this. You start as a boy. The character starts as a boy or as a girl. They are Frodo. And they're just in the Shire. If you ever watched Lord of the Rings, you should if you haven't. Read the books. They're wonderful. They start as a boy. You are Harry Potter. You have nothing. You're just a little, you're a dweeb. And eventually, over time, you gain respect and you gain your heroicism. You journey and you go through difficult times. But at the end, you become, towards the end of the book, you become a hero. You slay the dragon. You defeat the giant. If you kill Voldemort, you throw the ring into the mountain. That whole thing happens. And at the end of the story, you go back to the place you were, but this time you're a veteran and you rest. That's the way it works, right? At this time you return to the Shire, but now you're a wise man. You're like Bilbo, you returned, or you're like Harry Potter who marries, I forgot who he marries. It's not Ginny, you marry Ginny, and you return back, and you've learned and you have children and everything's okay. This is the way the hero's journey works. What I've noticed is that the dreamer's journey is exactly the opposite. In fact, it looks like a pit. This is the way the dreamer's journey works. You start as a dreamer. On this side, you're idealistic. If you've ever had a dream, you know this feeling. You believe that anything is possible. When you're that young Christian and someone comes to you and says, what's your kingdom dream? You're like, I'm gonna do this. You believe it's going to happen. You believe it's all possible. You believe that your brothers will bow. You believe that your life will have great impact. You're a new Christian and you think you can change the world. God's gonna do something amazing with you. Your life is gonna have impact. Something's gonna take shape and God's gonna use you to do something awesome, and you don't just feel it, you believe it, you know it's going to happen. And it's this adolescent faith. It's not bad, it's exciting, in fact. It's amazing to have it. You feel it. If this ever happened to you, it's not arrogant when you start talking about it, because you know it's gonna happen. You're like, God is going to use me, and it's amazing. It's not because I'm great, but because He's great. God's gonna use me to save my family. God's gonna take the gospel message and gonna help me impart it into my kids, and my kids are gonna become Christians, and they're gonna change the world for Jesus. It's gonna be awesome. I just became a Christian, and I know that God is gonna help restore that marriage that was broken. Oh yeah, I know God has given me a word or an idea or a concept or a vision that He's going to use me to fix that problem in the church, or to fix this issue, or to resolve that thing, and you just know it. Have you ever been a dreamer? Have you ever had this feeling? Maybe you haven't. Maybe you've never been enticed by a dream, but I've certainly been enticed by a dream. And then you start talking to people about it, and you go, oh man, let me tell you, God has given me a vision of what's gonna happen here. And what you notice is that people aren't as excited about it as you are. And you start talking about it, and they're like, cool, bro. That sounds great. And then the thing you thought was gonna happen, you start seeing it's not really happening. And a week goes by, and a month goes by, and a year goes by, and a season goes by. And all of a sudden, it feels like you're in a pit, because you've been disillusioned. Your heart is sick. The visions are gone, and you're thinking, maybe that wasn't me. Maybe it was all a lie. You have confusion, and you're frustrated, and you're afraid, and you kind of lose yourself in that pit, because your identity was tied to that vision. And the ideas for the future, what do they look like? And it's hopeless, and it's broken. And you look up and you wonder, this side must have been a lie. So this side definitely doesn't even exist. Maybe my life was always about just, wallowing in my own problems. Until one day you turn the last page and God tells you why He put you through all of this. And you go, wow, Lord, you are working in a way that I couldn't even understand. That's the journey of the pit. That's the journey of the dreamer. Now, some of you have, again, I say this, have never been enticed by a dream. You have steady old faith. You look at life, and I wish I was you, but that is not me. In fact, every week we have testimony shares. I want to tell you a little bit of my testimony. When I started coming out to church, I was a kid. I don't remember how old I was, 12, something like that. I started coming out, and I was attracted to the work of those who had given their life to the church. I looked up at my teenage leaders, or my middle school leaders, or the people preaching or singing, and I thought, man, I love this. I want something like this. And even as a boy, I had in my mind, God, you can use me for something like this? That's beyond my ability to comprehend, but I believed it was possible. And I remember I was one of the few kids that loved to sing, and I would clap with the songs, and I would be sitting back there, and I even looked around. I saw people taking notes, so I tried to take my own notes. I was all about it. I remember them asking me to stand up on stage and share a bit at a church like this and go, hey, whatever I said. And I imagine that's what I said. I had all these ideas about what I could do. And in fact, it was not just that it came in my mind, but I remember going to big services and big conferences and thinking to myself, you know what? I pray and I think God could use me for something like that. And one day I remember, I was young, and at the end of a church service, I sat outside. We had a little, a church steps. And I sat outside the church steps, and I was thinking to myself, man, I could be used for something. I forgot what the lesson was about, but the person preaching was a guy named Steve Johnson. And I remember listening and going, yes, I could, that would be awesome. God could use me, whatever. And I sat there, and Steve Johnson, this big time leader, this guy who knew it all, who was an idol for me, not like in a bad way, but like a person who I looked up to, sat beside me, and I'm a kid. I don't know how old I am, but he sits beside me and he says, what's your kingdom dream? And I say, I think I want to be used by God to help people or something like that. And he was like, Tony, I think you're going to preach to a generation, and you're going to inspire a generation. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. And here is not just my little dream, but also someone instilled in me a dream. I'm thinking, wow, this is great. And I became a Christian. I followed Jesus, and I did well for my high school career. And then eventually I went to college. And then I lost my way. And I lost my faith. And I left the church. I left my first love. And every once in a while, as I was, in a pit of my own despair, I would look back up and remember some of the stuff that I had thought was going to happen in my life. I mean, exactly. And I remember just the despair. If you've ever been there, man, you know it. If you've ever been there, you know it. You look back up and you go, why did I ever even believe that? So dumb. What a kid. And I learned a lot. If you ever want to know what happened to me in the pit, I'll let you know. But I learned a lot while I was down there. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what I loved or what I didn't love. I was humbled, humiliated, desperate, confused, and lost. You learn humility when it feels like the thing that you dreamed God would do with you is really never going to happen. And then one day, I started coming back to church. And God brought me opportunities to help in small ways. And I didn't think I was going to do anything. I thought I was just going to be a churchgoer. I was going to sit and I was going to do my work, and I was going to attend and fight and try. But I had already given up that whole thing by my actions. I had turned my back on God. I had belittled the kingdom. I had spoken terrible things about God and his church. I had lost the right of being used. And I believed that at that time, and I still even today, I'm blown away by it. And one day, I remember speaking at one of those big conferences that had inspired me in my youth. And I remember getting the invitation to speak at one of those conferences and thinking, no way. And then getting up to speak, and at this particular conference, somebody was in attendance that surprised me. It was Steve Johnson. And I finished speaking, and I got great feedback from people listening to me saying, thank you. It was very encouraging, inspiring, and all that. And there was, thousands of people who wanted to, engage. And at the end of it, I remember finding one person. I wanted to find Steve. I went over to Steve, and I said, hey, Steve. He said, great job, Tony, pat on my back. I said, Steve, do you remember us sitting on the pews of that church in Rockland County, and you telling me that one day I was going to preach to a generation? And Steve looked at me, full transparency. I remember exactly what he said. He said, Tony, I said that to every kid. Whatever. But let me tell you, it did something to me. It did something to me. And that was it. You go from dreamer to disillusionment to something that appears to be like glory. And here is my encouragement to you. wherever you are, maybe your kingdom dream is early on, and you've been telling everybody, and you think there's no way I'm ever going to be despondent or depressed or whatever. I got a harsh reality coming for you. Or maybe you feel like your dream is dormant and you've been disillusioned. Or maybe you feel like a chapter of your life has been realized. I want to encourage you that wherever you are, and in particular, if you're down here, I want to remind you that God is faithful. That God can take those who are at the bottom of their lives and actually do something with your story and craft for you something that is beyond your ability to understand. God is amazing, and God is faithful, and God will take you through the challenging times of your life and breathe life into you once again. And I want to say, if you're on the other side of these stories, if you're someone that has had glory from the dream that you had, I want to encourage you to breathe life into the brothers and sisters who are struggling right now. If you're like Jacob, I want you to keep in mind the dreams you heard from brothers and sisters and remind them that God can still use them for something great. And if you're down there, just remember what Psalm 40 says. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit. Out of the mud and the mire, he set my feet on the rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Maybe you put yourself down there, or maybe life circumstances have put you down there, but if you cry out to him, you will be heard. And you will go from a moment of sorrow and frustration to, I believe God wants to take all of our journeys and bring us to something where we can see glory in our lives and also in the life to come, eternal life.